Okay, welcome to our second town hall of Zcon4. Last year, the town hall was such a popular and well-watched recording subsequently on YouTube that we thought we would have double the fun this year. So yesterday we had a sort of non-technical town hall focused on funding and governance issues. Today, we're going to have a more technically focused town hall with representatives from across the ecosystem, ECC, myself and Andrew from ZF, John from QEDIT, Ying Tong, who's been doing research into programmability, Taylor, who's our security expert at large in the ecosystem, Strad and Nate from ECC. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, who's going to chair this panel in this town hall, and we'll get going.
Superb. All right, let's do it. That spared us the kind of short, awkward introduction, so thank you very much for that. We can go straight into questions. The first batch of questions I have will be kind of, we'll have someone on the panel that it's like mostly directed at, but we can all riff and build on that, and some more open ones. These are all on the kind of topic of roadmap planning for Zcash in the future. The first topic we'll start with is ZSAs, and so this is maybe most directed at you, Jonathan. And the question's, you describe the roadmap towards the deployment of ZSAs.
All right. I guess the roadmap towards deployment starts with the end of the roadmap towards finishing developing, the first alpha. So we have now achieved a state of development and synchronization with the rest of the teams, where there's a testnet, small testnet that can be used to see how to issue and transfer assets, move assets around. That was a lot of work on the circuit side and required quite a lot of effort. There is still a missing piece there that we need to discuss, the fees of ZSAs. We actually skipped that implementation because we realized that we need to form a consensus with the ecosystem on which fees structure to implement for ZSA. So we are going to implement, and that's our first, let's say, milestone here. We are going to implement the most straightforward one, but I'm expecting iterations on this piece. In order to go to production, we have started working on bringing the code closer to NU6 so that we can have this fairly large branch integrated to the main Zcash and then deployed. That's yet another. This is very intensive work. To give you an example, the extensive list of items that ECC has been working on in this past year, it goes towards closing bugs and dealing with this live system, but it also changes a lot of the underlying code that we've been using to build ZSA, and just catching up on that and being aligned with the latest is going to take time. But if I skip ahead a little bit where we're going, I think we'll start to see first users of ZSA like in its let's say alpha form, but in these coming months, we'll start to be answering requests on how to use it and maybe feedback on things that could be evolved already in the next few months. And then further down, prepare for the actual deployment. In parallel, we're building the big feature that is really needed by most use cases, which is asset swaps. So we have those two efforts, merging this and making sure that two assets can be exchanged simultaneously. I think we had a few conversations of that about that in previous Zcon and also in this one. So quite a lot of functionality that's going to be, in one day added into the protocol. I think most people also want to know when is this actually live, and that
would be great. Yeah.
That is probably me asking the same questions to the people around. So
I have several ideas of a follow-up question, but you're all welcome to chime in too. I'm glad that you brought up the fee thing as an example. I was going to ask kind of what do you think the community should be providing input on, or in general, what do you think should be done to help you the most as possible? I think you gave that as like an example of something that we should be coming to consensus on. So that's a good example. Are there others?
If there are, we've already been approached by people that are waiting for ZSA to be deployed to use it for their applications. So there's teams looking at stable coins, there's teams looking at bridges, and so this is useful for us because it informs who are going to be the first users and where should we put who are we going to be assisting first, and possibly not needing to assist. Maybe it works, out of the box without any change. Usually you do have to be around. But if people are already seeing what they could be doing with ZSA, we want to hear, and we can already start doing, bringing you the alpha tools and helping you hold this so that you can see what you would be doing with this next. This is, by the way, the result of a dedicated team of engineers. They're all sitting here, and I really want to thank their effort.
Any of said engineers want to react? Go ahead.
I have a question. For the testnet, is there a user experience for issuing and transferring?
For now, the initial way to test this is to spin, your own set of nodes. You're actually going to have a demo from Vivek, I think tomorrow.
Oh, awesome.
Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow.
Yeah.
On all the steps you need. I've asked, so it's not going to come as a surprise. I've asked Vivek to do the talk in a way that if I point my AI agent to it, it could do the steps and launch a node. I haven't tried, but that's my goal. It should be following, line by line, copy paste in your terminal, and you'll get the issuance and transfer.
I feel like Strad, you might have any some reaction.
The biggest step, as you mentioned, the biggest next step is getting it into a main full node base. Something that we've been trying to do, although this is something that is going to needs to be proven out with other teams, is making it easier for these kinds of larger scale developments to be done more easily on the main code base rather than needing to live in a very long persistent fork. Because as you're finding, it's the integration phase does add extra time and technical resources in there. So definitely learnings from this we should be collecting up and using for subsequent efforts that other people are going to do, because it's sort of the first big major change coming in from a second contributing organization. Yeah, I have, having not seen a PR yet, I will not be able to comment on how long that would take to get in. Beyond that, it will be the usual, get it into somewhere where we can test it and audit it. I'm quite interested to get it up on the main Zcash testnet at our earliest convenience. Yeah, it should be something that is, once we're in, the pathway past that point should be relatively straightforward. The big bit is the is the very giant PR that's probably going to have thousands of lines to review.
Sounds like you're looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun. Maintenance is fun. It has its own perks.
I just want to highlight as well that you talk about getting into testnet. There has been conversations about having multiple testnets and for making it possible to spin up new testnets for specific purposes, like developing a specific feature. And this is the sort of unsexy, uninteresting, boring work that node developers need to look at doing in order to make it possible for other organizations to start being able to easily contribute. Because at the moment, you're having to spin up, you're having to customize your own testnet.
Yep.
As and when we add ZSAs to a testnet, we also still want to have a testnet available for people to do testing on a reflection of the live mainnet. So this is just to highlight that it's not just the work that QEDIT is doing. There is also work from ECC and ultimately ZF to start making it easier for third parties to start integrating this sort of stuff into Zcash.
Yeah, and the other aspect that makes this kind of change pretty tricky is that it's very vertical in that it touches like, what is it, 4 code bases, I think, possibly 5, definitely 4, in terms of where the changes need to be. So some focused, like it would be good to do like a meta review of how this process has been, and I've got some ideas for how we could more easily thread things through as we go for these larger projects that we have already sort of collective buy-in that like, we want this to happen, it's just going to have to happen somehow. Feature flagging off Rust code and tying those into Zcashd and ZebraD main features and just like adding some more, I guess, structure to the way in which the various organizations involved in this collaborate and cross review and cross work for these sort of big feature things that while one organization might be sort of the lead on development, they still touch on everyone who in the ecosystem who needs to respond to those changes.
It needs to start being a very collaborative effort going forward.
How many testnets do you think we'll end up having? I mean, one concept that I've learned kind of recently is how Polkadot does testing. They have a notion of like a staging chain, which is like a little bit like a testnet plus, and we're used to blockchains having kind of the mainnet, the testnet, but there could clearly be room for multiple testnets with different purposes. I think that's interesting.
I think we should make it possible for anybody to create their own testnet. I think we should make it possible for anybody to what is a network at the end of the day? It's a magic number and it's a set of DNS seeders. So I think we should make it possible for anybody to pick a magic number that doesn't conflict with any other ones and spin up their own DNS seeder and to spin up their own testnet to do whatever testing they want. And if they want to, make it a hostile environment, like Ziggurat might want to spin up one where there's a very hostile environment or very high traffic or whatever, then they can. We can have a sort of official testnet that reflects mainnet, that is exactly the same as mainnet, so people can test their software just prior to deployment. We can have other test nets that test new features like ZSAs or moving away from proof of work, and just make it possible for anybody. And that way we don't have to worry about how many should we have. You can have as many as you want.
Yeah, one challenge with this testnet is we also want to verify backwards compatibility and that regular ZEC transactions work well and didn't degrade. So but at the same time, to participate in this testnet, you need to use new wallets that implement the functionality that we've added. So it's a bit, for now we're kind of playing all those roles. We launched the testnet and we pretend to be all the sides. And it's really like very recently achieved to this alpha stage. But as we add more participants, we will need to figure out how to also test the interaction between ZSA and regular ZEC transactions.
And another benefit of having a testnet as opposed to just locally testing your changes is that third-party participants can also join. Like, I think Penumbra, they're very much in the testnet phase, and they release testnets very frequently, like one every few weeks or something. I think they're on like 37 now, something like that.
These are all running. They don't turn off the previous one.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea is rapid iteration so that people interested in building apps on Penumbra can all join in. And for ZSAs, like John mentioned, a lot of the use cases would be bridges or things like stablecoins that would very likely involve participation from like an existing stablecoin on another chain. Or for example, I know the Anoma people have proposed a Zcash to Anoma bridge. So yeah, they could also just start experimenting on the testnet. Yeah, I think for ZSAs in particular, making it available to these third-party collaborators would be essential.
Yeah, and they announced we're going to destroy all the assets. This testnet is shutting down, and the next one is starting, so people can wrap up their experiments and start it.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Another use case I hope to see would be wallet developers, like integrating ZSAs early.
Yeah, so all of these can already start, knocking on our door and seeing what the tools can do. But once there's a more open testnet for everybody to play, they don't need to knock on anyone's door. They just point their software to that node, and it works.
I'm pretty excited to see people's reaction to this alpha demo. I'm pretty excited for that. Let's move on from ZSAs for a bit to proof of work and transition towards proof of stake or something that's non-proof of work. It's kind of directed at you, Nathan. I thought you might recap your hybrid proof of work and proof of stake kind of proposal, and then the question beyond that, the question I have written here is what's the time scale? So again, a date's welcomed, but not holding you to it.
Yeah, okay, so I just gave a presentation about this design approach called trailing finality layer. It's really early, so it's kind of a design brainstorm. But the idea behind it is, can we sort of like introduce proof of stake to the existing network while minimizing disruption to the existing network? So the existing like mining system would still operate, the nodes would be as unchanged as possible, and there would be minimum impact to use cases like wallets should function without change. I don't know how feasible this approach is, so there's still lots of open questions, and there's also like potential alternative approaches. So answering the timeline piece is really tricky, especially because I think there's different groups working on different potential features for the Zcash protocol, and they're going to interact. So for example, for proof of stake, I'm a fan of building in like liquid staking into the protocol, and the argument would be if we don't build it into the protocol, third parties might introduce their own products, and they might be centralized, so it might be like a Coinbase or whoever, and then if that's a popular product, they end up sort of centralizing a lot of small-scale users who get this extra benefit if they're using Coinbase instead of just the base protocol. So that would be an argument for including it, but if you need to include that, you need more than one asset. So if the proof-of-stake protocol is going to have built-in liquid staking, then we would need ZSAs, right? So there's these potential interdependencies. Another big one is for bridging, we might want finality. For proof of stake, a lot of proof of stake protocols have finality. So I'm really feeling like what could be helpful with multiple teams is if we can start to build out like a diagram of potential upgrades and how they depend on each other and who's like working on them. And it would be really cool if it could also somehow help us encompass and visualize different alternatives. So like, oh, you know, if we have proof of stake that doesn't require multi-assets, it would go in this direction. If it does require multi-assets, then it's going to depend on ZSAs. So that's my messy answer, which does not have a timeline.
The multi-asset, is that, I'm not fully familiar there, is that where you get like staked asset of the asset?
Oh, yeah. So liquid staking, if you're not familiar, is like, let's say you have a proof of stake protocol that doesn't have liquid staking. So you can just post Zec to become a validator or a staking provider, and you earn a return for doing that. But you've posted your Zec, so you can't access it. Well, what if you know, you have 10 Zec and a company like Coinbase? I don't know if they maybe have run into like regulatory trouble doing things like this, but in the past they have done things like this. They say, hey, Zcash users, if you send 10 Zec to us, we will stake for you and we'll give you 10 Coinbase Zcash bucks. And you can use those. You can like buy stuff with them or whatever. And then later, if anyone brings us 10 Coinbase Zcash bucks, they can redeem them. And they're sort of managing that. So that is basically a central institution offering this financial product that makes it more appealing to stake. So in practice, empirically, this is extremely popular. And so liquid staking is like, instead of having centralized institutions do that, can we make protocols that do that? Yeah, so if you're going to do that, you want to have multiple wrapped tokens created by different issuers who are somehow like pooling staking or something like that.
So the multiple asset piece here is still to allow different actors to be the people giving you virtual Zecs.
Yeah.
But that's virtual Zecs is
a key idea. I mean, a proof of stake doesn't necessarily have to have slashing. Of course, many do. Ethereum has slashing. Ethereum doesn't have built-in liquid staking, but that's added on by these external third parties. But the liquid staking asset can still be slashed. So I mean, you can over a long time period withdraw from the staked asset to the plain normal one, no longer slashable when you're not out of it. But yeah, so the rules, like the slashable asset is very different than the non-slashable asset. So at a minimum, you would need, I think, a one-bit, different asset type, even if nothing at all else.
Right. So just coming back to the timeline for proof of stake, so there's these big design questions, and there's also road mapping questions, because we might decide, oh, we could transition to a simpler form of proof of stake that doesn't have that built in, and then add it in a subsequent step. And if we choose to do that, then maybe we unbundle the first step from ZSAs. We can do them in parallel or not. And doing that kind of planning across organizations it's a good problem to have. Like, it's really good that we have multiple teams, and figuring out what the roadmap is a tricky problem. That's a good thing, and we got to figure out how to do it. So yeah, I just have this vision of like, can we make just a diagram of potential upgrades? There's boxes, and each one is like a potential improvement, and try to start mapping out how do they depend on each other, and which direction should we go? What is the community? Do they want to go this way or that way? I'm hopeful to figure something like that out.
Seems like you're saying the best way to participate now, because it's early, is to be helping in this brainstorming stage or contributing to this diagramming, mapping out the possibilities effort.
Yeah, we've effectively done similar things like earlier on in Zcash history with just the the ECC people who are working on it, and then ECC and ZF together, figuring out like what feature sets make sense and what things can be, well, at the time considered to be easily deployed alongside each other. Doesn't always play out in practice, but because you have those kinds of ones where you have interdependencies within the features, and then you just have things where it's like, yeah, we thought something was great, it wasn't great, we want to fix it, and it's not too much technical debt removal at the same time as our main feature, and it's convenient to do it at the same time. So you'll have some features that will carry on like that. Like, for example, one of the things that we have been considering and playing around with is the idea of, so you have the memo field in transactions, and currently the memo field is associated with a given output. And if you have a transaction that has a large number of dummy outputs, or in the case of ZSAs, split note outputs, like dummy outputs on that side, you end up with a larger transaction field cost for that you're using for nothing, and it's just taking up blockchain space. So one of the options there is to move the memo field piece to a separate part of the transaction, so then users can choose to have fewer memos in there, and instead each output is given a capability to decrypt it. That has some privacy considerations that need to be made there in terms of like, you're adding another way that transactions can be visibly different. But if the Schelling point becomes everyone either uses the one output for everything mode or just one memo because that's all we need, then that can be an overall sort of like nice cleanup improvement. But that kind of change is relatively, it affects wallets, but it doesn't affect like mining nodes. So they can be sort of independent efforts that get deployed at the same time potentially.
In the longer term, we may want to start looking at removing the messaging component from the Zcash blockchain entirely. So at the moment, as well as memo fields, we write notes to the blockchain, but we also write the information that the recipient needs in order to be able to spend that note, and that's why you end up scanning the blockchain. In the longer term, particularly if we end up moving to some sort of scalability solution that involves some form of roll-up, we may want to explore having a different out-of-band style mechanism for transmitting the information that the recipient needs in order to be able to spend that note to them, and not having everything stored on the blockchain. And that could ultimately put us in a position where we could end up with a far more efficient, smaller blockchain, making it quicker to sync and whatnot. The downside is that if I want to send some ZEC to Strad, I will need to write the transaction, write it to the Zcash blockchain, but then separately send him a message, and that could be through any mechanism, which tells him how he can then spend that node.
Yeah.
That's probably looking further down the roadmap than is reasonable right now.
Yeah, the trade-off you're making there is the efficiency of the main chain and efficiency of discovery and things versus recoverability. Is the chain itself currently the chain itself is used as the store of prior information, and if you drop your phone in a mud puddle and then step on it, you can then go to the store, grab your wallet, go back to your safety deposit box or your iCloud account, grab your seed phrase, stick it back in, and you're fine.
Yeah.
And with that kind of approach, we would need some other recovery mechanisms to be built in place.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that I think that's a bit further down the track, but it's good to be thinking about it in context of new things we're looking at deploying to the network, like ZSAs and so on, in terms of what constraints they place on the information that users need to be able to obtain and transact with their funds.
Yeah.
You got any reaction, Taylor? Saw you nodding, but
So something to sort of like bring all of this together that's on my mind is I think we need to, for both ZSAs and proof of stake and potential scalability improvements, we need to try to really hard to build a complete product suite. Like first imagine what we want to put out in the world and what people are gonna come and want to use. And we wanna make sure that's complete in the sense that So for example, with the NU5 upgrade, there's a lot of excitement around getting rid of the trusted setup, but it was kind of launched in a way where the protocol got activated, but then support was missing for wallets, so people who were really excited about it couldn't immediately start using it. So I think for both ZSAs and proof of stake, we should really imagine what is everything we need so that the people who are really excited to be validators, to make stable coins and to stake their ZEC, make sure they have everything they need from day one so that that hype lands really well on the market, and then we see a lot of use.
All right, I'll move on. You want to react?
Well, I wanted to follow up with that too. I think it's not just about getting products ready when the protocol activates, but if we can get more of the end product prototyping started earlier, it can inform the actual protocol design sometimes. So it'd be nice if we could catch, oh, if we change this piece of the protocol, the usability of this prototype is a lot nicer. Why don't we do that now instead of after we've deployed?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, kind of turning it around so you're not making the technical protocol decisions on their own without considering the UX. Design the UX first, and then what protocol do we need to implement that UX? That's a great point.
Yeah. Which is why wallet devs should show up to Arborist calls.
In my previous life, working with banks, one of the ways that I used to design systems was I would do a wireframe design of the interface that the end user would interact with. And then you figure out from that, right, what information are you gathering, what information needs to be brought in, what data needs to be, market data, for example, needs to be solicited, what states do you transition through if you're creating a transaction? Well, you put in these bits of information, it then has to pull maybe an exchange rate, it then displays you something, you hit confirm, and then that actually helps you then design the back-end systems and the back-end flow for all these systems. And I think it's something that we should think about trying to inculcate into our product process for Zcash, and doing so at the ecosystem level, going out and saying, what would you like to see on Zcash, or what are the business objectives that we want to see for Zcash, whether it's something like decentralization? How do we incentivize more people to run nodes? Maybe instead of having a proof of stake, what we have is a proof of service, where you get rewarded for running a node. And in order to make sure that you run a node honestly, you have to put up a security deposit that gets slashed if you behave dishonestly, right? So maybe we need to start experimenting a little bit with twisting our thinking to say, right, what are the objectives that we want to achieve for Zcash, or what do our users or potential users want to do, and then figuring out what can we build, or how can we build that capability in at the protocol layer so that it can then be exposed by the UI and UX developers.
Do you think, as it regards proof of stake, that this would be something that would be, visible through that process, that users would say they want to be able to stake or something like that? Yeah. All right, I'll move on past proof of stake. So this next one we'll start out addressed towards Ying Tong. So did an excellent presentation on quite a range of possible approaches towards programmability. Maybe just by picking one of them, maybe you don't have to answer it for all of the spectrum of approaches there, but what would you say is a roadmap process towards the deployment of some programmability approach of your choice beyond ZSAs?
I think the least invasive approach to programmability would be to do it on layer 2, so to do it on an overlay network. So concretely, the changes that would require on layer 1 would just be some kind of way to post data between L1 and L2. So Ethereum calls this data blobs. And as Dodger, I think, was saying, this further sort of separates the concerns between the plain text or memo field messaging layer and like the actual transfers that are native to Zcash. And yeah, I think, for example, Zexi or Alio, they're really flexible and they allow any kind of logic to be deployed to the network. And a great way to use this flexibility is to encode like the state transition function for whatever application or rollup you want. And yeah, what your application does internally, it can be totally arbitrary. It can be like TEEs. It can be like just like MPC computations all day long. But the point being that, first of all, Zcash users who are just using Zcash for transfers are minimally affected. And I think secondly, if we introduce some kind of sort of depth one recursion that hides which application you're using, then all applications could benefit from the same anonymity set. And I think that's one of the big advantages of Zcash right now. If you compare it to, say, Tornado Cash, Zcash has a huge anonymity set in comparison. And yeah, if we could allow layer 2 applications to easily make use of that, I think that would be, we would be just a more welcoming environment for people to build their own applications.
May I comment?
You want to react? Yeah, please.
I in particularly like that level 1 recursion piece because if we do want to start introducing trusted execution environments, instead of giving them, like a first-class place in Zcash, you're still zero-knowledge proof first for that recursion, but then whatever you're verifying, you could verify an attestation from a trusted execution and choose to switch vendors or do whatever you need to keep your security of TE going on. I think it's interesting to consider a TE augmented Zcash ecosystem because, in the past, those were like completely different pieces of technology that wouldn't sit together. And I think we're way past that. It would be, I think, a very quick win to unlock a huge, usability for everyone.
Yeah, like for example, let's say for ZSA swaps, currently you need matchers who are off-chain and who see the details, plain text, values and asset types being swapped. Whereas if you wanted to deploy this matcher algorithm as a smart contract living inside the TEE, then users would no longer have to submit their swaps to some centralized matcher. Instead, they could encrypt it to some TEE. Yeah, that's one example.
And that would broadly have the benefit of the actual swap itself, the settlement completely independent of that matcher algorithm. So never any TE failure putting funds at risk. So
yeah, we need to keep in mind the security risks of any model that uses TEEs. So TEEs are in a sense like fundamentally impossible because like the secret data is literally in the processor somewhere, just a matter of how hard it is to extract it. And on top of that, there's been a bunch of side channel attack research that have just like totally devastated Intel SGX and other TEs. So I think the key is really like balancing the trust you put in the TEE with like the trust level that the TE is proven in practice. So like once it's been a few years since someone has found the latest side channel attack, then you can sort of trust it for maybe don't trust funds to it, but you can trust it for some like privacy applications and things like that.
I really like the idea of your suggestion also of keeping a very firm layer between the ordinary Zcash transactions and this extra execution layer.
Yeah.
But I think that idea of having separation between the layers is really interesting. I know, Andrew, that you're a big fan of TEs. You think they've got huge potential. I, on the other hand, have been skeptical about the prospect of tying Zcash to a specific hardware platform. But if you can get the advantages of TEEs at a separate layer whilst keeping the Zcash layer 1 hardware agnostic, I think that achieves the best of both worlds. And also that idea of having separate layers, we've kind of prototyped that a little bit in the past with our work with JP Morgan back in, I think, was it
2017? I think.
2017. When we had the model there was you had a programmability layer which was private between the participants in the deal, which then settled its actual transaction to the shared layer 1. And I think it's potentially a very powerful model to use going forward.
Yeah, we've been discussing programmability on and off for quite some time, I think, now. And actually, sort of jumping off Taylor's point there, one of the reasons that at least I, as a full node maintainer, have been reluctant in the past is the way, like the capabilities that we had for doing programmability in a shielded way were quite limited. And so the approaches that were mostly being considered were either like way too expensive to be viable for shielded, or they were looking at extensions of transparent programmability with the intention that, oh, we can just migrate to shield later. And it's the we can just part that's the devil in the details. We already have the case that just within the Bitcoin script system that we have for transparent Zcash, there's like a whole swath of possible programs that people can build and use, and we have very little way to actually introspect what's going on there because it's all hidden behind hash commitments, even though everything is eventually public. Fortunately, I did some trawling of the network, and it looks like about 98% of it is all just multi-sig, effectively. And I think the remaining thing is some people were doing some like attempts at hash time lock contracts at one point. So like the actual set of observed like programs that someone has spent money from is pretty small. But now that we're starting to see these more viable, more usable shielded execution environment and shielded programmability platforms there, that's less of a concern now because we know that the scope of things that people can do there is large enough that it's useful, and there's no concern with like adding, like there was adding transparent technical debt that we then have to figure out how to migrate later, and onboarding use cases that we couldn't fundamentally support later.
The one big thing that's also happening is because you have, or you're about to have Zcash Shielded Assets, the moment of issuance give you a lot of flexibility on what that asset should be doing, allowing, and you can have that as a point where you decide on, what's that extra layer of programmability. You wouldn't be experimenting with core Zec on things just as an experiment, but with ZSA you can probably allow yourself to dedicate an asset for some experimentation. Without, it's pretty limited spill elsewhere.
I do want to say, my framing for the importance of programmability is that it's a hedge against being unable to correctly predict what is going to be the most usage case. You never need programmability if you know the applications you'd want. You don't need scripting language if you know you just want multi-sig. You just make a multi-sig feature. So the goal for programmability is always to have a way that you can let someone else permissionlessly, define some application that you hadn't thought of.
So yeah, I was gonna consider an alternative. So first of all, I really like keeping the separation of layers if possible, to keep the core simpler. But then where my mind would go is, and it comes down to a lot of details, but like what exactly is the difference between keeping a good layer separation and having a second layer versus a good bottom layer that can just bridge to other ecosystems? Because often, I kind of have this notion that it's sort of like if building the protocol is making the layout and building the buildings for city, that could be awesome if people move in, but they might really like another city that's already there, and like, can we connect to it? So that's often where my mind goes. I guess I prefer, all things being equal with the difference between the two, I prefer to sort of prioritize bridging with the assumption that if we can connect to where people want to go or where the applications already are, then it seems like a good win.
But it might be a way to do bridging much more easily, because bridging is beginning to be solved, pairwise in many different blockchains.
Yeah.
Maybe you can adapt and adopt the solutions that you think are the most secured, using this extra layer of trusted execution.
Yeah, actually, to counteract my point, I've been talking to some teams about with like different bridging products or technologies, and I asked one of them like, "Hey, I'm working on this proof of stake proposal. Are there any requirements that your bridging thing would have that I should know about? Because maybe that would inform the design I'm working on." And they were like, they didn't know too much about Zcash, and they're like, "Okay, well, do you have smart contracts so we can deploy a light client on your system that bridges into our system?" And I was like, not yet. So it's kind of a funny chicken and egg problem.
And in this conversation, trusted execution and zkEVM or just EVM in a trusted execution, those are all legit places to check, to have rapid wins and adoption from these ecosystems.
And bridging to and from Zcash in particular, I think is only interesting if the bridging composes anonymity sets. So like, I think otherwise it's like a little bit pointless, I think. Yeah, you might as well bridge to and from Bitcoin.
I don't think so, by the way. But just because like just a simple story is like, if I could bridge Zec from the shielded pool to Ethereum, then it's really simple to unlink things. So like I could register an ENS name, and then I could issue some like MakerDAO or like do some DeFi thing and keep those very unlinked, which in a way that might be difficult without using some other privacy technology. So I grant that it's nicer if sort of the horizon of privacy is even more extended, but I think already that's providing something useful if we can get there.
Yeah, I think if you consider two-way bridging as well, that's when it becomes important to compose these anonymity sets. And yeah, if I bridge to Ethereum and I just never come back, then I agree. You're effectively using Zcash as a big mixer. But yeah, if we actually want to bridge in a way that preserves the anonymity set and also preserves like invariance across the two chains, then that becomes a very non-trivial design challenge. Yeah.
All right, I might move on from programmability. That was great. We went through a bunch of nuanced discussion on pretty specific technical directions. The next questions will be a little bit more broad. This one will go to Taylor kind of first. So far with Zcash, we have like the top stellar reputation for security, quality of zero-knowledge proof development, general reliability of the system overall. As we start to increase our community involvement, more organizations, more collaboration on different parts of features that fit together somehow, your independent security researcher viewpoint is, I think, especially appreciated there. Like, what do you think we should be doing to make sure that we are not giving up our brand of quality security?
Well, number one thing, go see my talk that I gave today about security engineering. Basically, we want to make sure that we're doing all the standard things like audits, code reviews done internally by organizations. ECC has a really, really good track record for just being super careful with code they deploy, retroing any kind of bug that gets discovered, and that's really paid off. Like, there hasn't been a major security vulnerability in a really long time. So sort of extending that to the broader community, I think it's important to make sure that like the projects, especially like ZCG grant recipients, have security support. So I'm going to recommend, like, currently that's sort of my role is to audit these projects. And I'm going to recommend like opening that up to an even wider audience of security engineers by putting out RFPs, so that way we can get like more attention from audit firms and individual contributors who come and start to audit our projects. Yeah, so really the main things are like learning from failure and just being careful and auditing stuff.
Anyone else thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, from a, like, if we think about the effects that bugs can have, like that's actually the sort of the thing that drives the review policy that we use for Zcash is like thinking about like blast radius of a bug. So we sort of split them into roughly 3 levels of like a bug's going to affect the people who encounter it. A bug could affect everyone using a particular product or a wallet or something, and in particular could risk user funds. Or a bug could be like existential, you know, affecting the consensus rules, affecting the like the core pieces that mean that it would affect the entire network, no matter whether you were running the vulnerable software or not.
Can I add one more layer to that? There's people outside of Zcash that consider Zcash as a huge place to check the cryptographic primitives. So,
cryptography review as a service.
as a really, really expensive service. But I would say that the catastrophic failure can, you know, go all the way there.
Yeah, well beyond the people running the software, indeed. And so one of the things that like in terms of limiting the reach of a security issue, well, we have the full node developers, so primarily ECC and ZF at this point, but anyone who's maintaining the Zcash D or Zebra D nodes, which, by the way, anyone's free to like just offer their own support for either of these if they wish, like with their own support policies, and act as someone who is helping to maintain these. But the people who are the ones merging the code in there form sort of like the technical backstop. And so, you know, we end up having to sort of necessarily have the final say of what's going to go in and what is sufficient review, sufficient consideration for these things to be safe for our users. Now, how to scale that as the number of organizations and the number of changes involved grows is interesting, but my hope is it would be somewhat self-limiting in that, you know, as you're finding, these very large changes can be quite technical and slow and like large to get moved in. So it's sort of like in a level rate limiting in terms of how much we can and how rapidly we can change the project. And that hopefully means that the review burden on the things coming in is something that we as a collective project can continue to manage and deal with from that. When you get down to that next radius in where it's like risking user funds, there you're looking at more like the individual wallet behaviors and things where, like, you know, it's limited to the user of a single wallet, and so that's where things like what Taylor's been doing are fantastic for sharding out the security work that's done there.
Another thing to add here is that, like, we're talking about the security of like new features that we're adding, but we can also get a lot of security returns by like simplifying the code. Like, if we could switch over to Zebra and delete the Zcash D code base, that'd be great, because like we wouldn't have all of this like code written in a memory unsafe language that we inherited from Bitcoin a long, long time ago. And things like deprecating the Sprout pool would be like really good things that don't necessarily add new features, but they really like pay down our security risk.
I think one aspect of security that actually grows with the number of contributors is basically more eyes on the code. So my experience working with Halo 2 has shown me, like, pretty much we implemented Halo 2 for the so that we could build the Orchard circuit. And then it got adopted by lots of projects, like in Ethereumverse, for really unimaginable applications way beyond the Orchard circuit. Like whole virtual machines are being built as Halo 2 circuits, and like huge neural nets. So the effect of this increased adoption and usage has been people getting more concerned about security. And I've seen people developing like formal verification and mechanized proving for Halo 2 circuits. So this amount of analysis, I think what was only possible with like the expanded interest and usage beyond just Orchard. But yeah, that is not to say that we're merging these like machine learning circuits and VMs into Zcash Halo 2.
Programmability.
Yeah, there's some benefits from other like having more contributors that we can still gain security-wise.
It's a really cool, point out benefit of, it answers the question of like, what is it that we're getting by, knowing that a lot of the technical work that we do gets, aped and copied by everyone else. What are we getting from that? That's a really cool point of benefit getting. Nate, this is still calling you.
Well, sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but for security, one thing I want to make sure we're keeping an eye on, especially as we grow larger with multiple organizations, is figuring out how to handle like inbound requests, like who's going to notice when there's a problem, or if someone's showing up like a Zcash user and they're like, hey, this thing seems weird, who do they contact, or how do they know who to contact, or if they're, how can we detect those, how can we educate people who to contact, and how can we sort of do the switchboard correctly to get the right teams involved whenever we're needing to respond to something. That piece, that incoming piece, seems really important for me, for us to keep our eyes on.
Do you think we need a community channel somehow, beyond what we have then? Those kind of things don't necessarily lend themselves towards like arborist call kind of things, especially if they're sensitive.
Yeah, no, I was thinking more about like incident response, so you don't talk about it on an arborist call. So like just from experience, like the latest incident we were dealing with at ECC was a security issue that affected a lot of Bitcoin clones. And so I don't even remember how we got contacted, but somebody was like, hey, we're contacting all the Bitcoin clones, and so we've gotten in touch with you, ECC. And one question is, why did they pick us? Like, why, and not the foundation? Or maybe they did contact the foundation. So, I mean, we looped in the foundation, and it turns out, like, they did not have to worry about that problem because of their new code base, but it was important to check. So I don't know if I have a clear response or answer here, but just in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, how did they figure out to contact ECC?
They probably went to Zcash/Zcash in the repo and just clicked security, is my guess.
So those kinds of mechanisms, however people are figuring out what it is, let's just make sure, let's make sure we're keeping track of that as we're growing to multiple orgs.
That looked like it kind of worked.
No, it worked well in that case. It's just like...
with the only two organizations needing to...
I'm pretty sure if somebody is like, I think my ZSA is malfunctioning, and they hit you up, we'll find a way to...
Yeah. I mean, it can be kind of obvious for now, but like, once we're talking about bridging, or like there's second layers with programmability, or there's more and more wallets or more applications, maybe sometimes that starts to become inefficient or even more of a risk, because ideally for a security incident, You want to figure out how to get the people who can fix it in the loop quickly, but you don't want to loop in too many extraneous parties because there's more and more risk that somebody might take advantage of that. So like the example with that big recent bug involved like dozens or more Bitcoin-like projects, and so it was really nerve-wracking. Like, I don't know who all these people are. A lot of those projects were unresponsive, so we don't know, if it was kind of it's an instructive scenario to think about, because the blast radius was multiple chains. Well, there's a lot of Bitcoin clone chains where I do not trust the people behind them, right? So are some of those people involved in learning about this attack? Just these kinds of issues we want to keep an eye on as we're growing.
To that point of sort of like a shared understanding of how we go about things, I mean, the incident response process in most orgs, I imagine, follows the same kind of procedure. It would be nice if we had if the relevant orgs who are involved in Zcash have, we already somewhat have this informally between some of the earlier orgs, but having some more dedicated security contacts and shared understanding of the incident response process, so that we can have, instead of it being just like an ECC response call or a ZF response call, it's the, we have the Zcash strike team or whatever we ping
the tree surgeons.
Yeah, we ping the Zec signal, and everyone flies in from the trees, and so maybe that then is the security group of if there's 4 orgs, 4 people, and they're the first ones who pick it up. They all have a shared understanding of the response process, and then from there they can sort of pull in oh, this is just an ECC thing. Okay, well the other orgs are aware, but it can now transition to be an ECC response, for instance.
Yeah, I'd be very much, in fact, I've already kind of mentioned that idea to Nick. I think that the ECC's response process, it was initially drafted by me. It was improved by Bam Bam and Taylor. It has evolved over time. I think that we should just adopt it as the Zcash ecosystem incident response process, because one of the things that I think worked incredibly well was during the whole Halborn disclosure was that we had multiple people. We had people from ECC, we had people from ZF, and we had Taylor, all collaborating really, really, really well. It was ECC that was leading it in that instance, and that made absolute sense, even with hindsight. But I think it worked incredibly well. The outcome was really, really good, and I think that we want to make sure that future incidents have a similar good process and good outcome.
Yeah, there's definitely room for a grant-funded organization that just is the security contact, does security coordination, and also has engineers on staff, so that if you need to do a rapid response bug fix, those engineers can actually go into a community project that might just be someone's hobby, make the fix, and get it out there quickly.
Yeah, so maybe for that kind of coordination, it would be prudent to loop in ZCG, wallet projects, big grantees. So yeah, and then figuring out the right size of the group, who are the participants, is something we should sort out.
Yeah.
All right, I'd love to move along and ask a next question that starts with you, Strad. So actually, you kind of brought up this topic of deprecating old things and paying off technical debt. This was inspired by a forum question from Ole or Olek from our forum. That's about first of all, is there already a plan to deprecate Sprout? And
yeah, we've already made strides on that part of the roadmap in. Let's see, so obviously the first thing to deprecating Sprout is alternative. So, NU2 or 1, I forget the numbering scheme. NU1 with Sapling, we introduced Sapling. We now have Sapling and Orchard. And then in the NU5 in particular, we introduced a new transaction format, the V5 format, where we just don't include any Sprout fields. So if you only support V5, you can't create Sprout or use Sprout. We still support V4 transactions on the network, which are the ones that still have a Sprout field but don't have Orchard, so you can't use both at the same time, which is little things that we sort of do along the way to try and migrate things. We've also turned off the ability to send funds into the Sprout pool, so at this point, it is a purely deflationary pool. As people can move funds around within it and then pull them out, but there's no further way to inject more long-term usage into that pool. So as far as like a roadmap for removing it, we've got a couple of options that have been discussed around that we want to execute on. I would like to see another ratchet of this, like ratchet forward of this in the next network upgrade, if possible. Whether that just be we turn off the ability to do any kind of transaction instead of just except removing, although that has some potential like privacy issues in terms of the way the Sprout worked. Or I know that you've talked about, Dodger, some ideas for taking the Sprout set off and making it separately spendable, but in a way that lets us get rid of all the consensus pieces for Sprout.
Yeah, my really bad idea, and if you read the GitHub issue that describes this, it literally says, this is a terrible idea, but this ticket should remain open until we come up with a better idea. And the idea was that we take the Sprout state, and then we basically move it off the blockchain and create a faucet where anybody who owns a Sprout note has to go to the faucet, create a proof using their Sprout keys that they own a certain a note or whatever, and then are able to present that proof to someone, or a multi-sig organization that controls the Sprout wallet that will then dispense those funds back to them. It's a terrible idea, and we shouldn't do it. The question is, is there something that we can do better? Can we take, for example, the Sprout state, wrap it up into something that can then exist on Orchard, and then allow people to use their Sprout keys to create a transaction that they can then spend from Orchard.
Yeah, there are definitely ways to go about doing this, and at that point, it's a trade-off in what's the minimum we could sort of pare back all the Sprout code to where it just has enough to be able to verify this. And I mean, in the simplest case, you could remove all of the Sprout shielding tech by just requiring people to reveal the note on-chain. But the other thing to consider with that bit of deprecation is that there's the economic side of people will have lost keys. There will be funds that will never move. That pool will have some minimum value that will never go below. And at some point, it's like, well, as a community, we want to keep the code base as a maintainer, I really want to keep the code base in a maintainable state, reducing the security burden on us and the rest of the network. And so cutting out those pieces and making a decision on what to do with the leftover funds is something that we should be looking into. That's, on the technical side, removing stuff is really easy. Like, I love deleting code. But it's the economic representation of what that means that's the blocking piece at this point in terms of what we can do to move that forward.
Yeah, what if somebody, back shortly after Zcash launched, bought 1,000 Zec, created a paper wallet, and then locked it away in a safe deposit box, planning to come back to it in 10 years' time, and they come back and, oh, sorry, your funds are gone. Like that sort of reputational risk, I think we have to be very, very cognizant of.
Yeah, I think this is something we need to be careful about, especially with future pools. Given that to completely get rid of the complexity, we have to burn funds. I think it's really important to actually send a clear message when we're creating a new pool. Like, can you rely on your funds to be retrievable 10, 20 years from now? Or is there some expectation that you're going to have to move your funds regularly? And if we do create that expectation, how do we do the user experience for it so that like how do you make it hard for someone to forget to move their funds every year or something like that? Like, I don't know, that's something like designers should be thinking about, like how do you incentivize people to keep their funds live and prevent people from forgetting about their funds?
So last year, I had a proposal that we start a regular ongoing process that would find funds that are sitting in old pools and then eventually just completely remove those pools. So this is the kind of proposal where it is a big problem now, like with Sprout, especially if somebody buried a key and they expect to dig it up in 10 years. So my thinking, and I don't, it's kind of controversial, but if we bite the bullet now, then we won't have the same problem with sapling or orchard or so on and so forth. So I'm kind of an advocate that we just establish a norm or an expectation that pools get regularly retired after X years. And that's just something people coming into Zcash need to learn about. But that's pretty controversial. It's very different from most other cryptocurrencies. It's like definitely the opposite of how I perceive like Bitcoin norms or values. But I still like it. I think it has some benefits. So the obvious one is for technical debt. So there's always this trade-off between, okay, what about these users who buried their keys 10 years ago? So a lot of times people focus on the detriment to them of doing this, but in my mind, there's also a cost to current users and new users, because if we have a norm or establish an agreement that we never move the old funds, then we have this challenge of like old tech always remaining there and always representing some risk to current and future users. So there is kind of a trade-off in my mind, and I'm a fan of skewing more towards continual improvement. And hopefully, if that sort of norm were adopted, then the ecosystem would sort of evolve protection mechanisms around it somehow through education or maybe like technical product means. But
is there a way to know the numbers? Like how much?
Numbers of what?
Like how much is in this oldest pool?
Yeah. The
30,000
balances of the pools are known.
Yeah, it's about 30,000 ZEC.
So
You use the phrase "find the funds," but you just mean kind of treating it by a...
Oh yeah, so I meant like that proposal specifically was like there'd be a penalty if you don't move it, and it would sort of ramp up, and eventually it gets to 100%, and at that point it gets deleted. Yeah, so.
So ZSAs are not aware of any pool besides Orchard, right?
At the moment, yes, that's correct.
Right, but could they be? Like,
Yeah.
could ZSAs be like a good interface to integrate old pools?
Like make a ZSA like a Sprout asset as a ZSA?
Yeah.
And airdrop it. Yeah. So, I mean, I talked a little bit about that in my presentation. The thing is, I think some of those kinds of approaches are feasible technically, but the question is, how often will it get exercised? So, like, if we put a bunch of like effort and expertise and brilliance to build out this advanced, sophisticated things, what if there's like 0 Sprout users? It's all lost keys. We don't know. But what if it is, and we just did all that effort and it never gets used? Or what if there are users, we do all this effort, but it's like a really weird thing, because they're only going to want to migrate like one time. So it's like building a product that's only going to be used once, and then when it is used, how do we know it's really going to work well, right? Like, do they need a special wallet? and who distributes that wallet, and like, does it install? Like, how do we know? Like, we would have to do ongoing maintenance for this sort of one-time event. So, yeah, I'm kind of concerned about how well that can work.
Yeah, but like, we're already at the point now where the clock is ticking on. If you have Sprout funds, you can use them, because like, we have, as of a release or two ago, we've turned off the ability to create Sprout transactions entirely in Zcashd, because just technically maintaining it was just too burdensome. And we had slowly been turning things off in various places, like preventing using Sprout at all if you're involving Orchard and things. But yeah, after the more recent changes for ZIP 317 and things, you can't use the current version of Zcashd with that. Now, you can still, at the moment, go back and use an older, like a 5 whatever version of Zcashd to spend your Proud funds. That's not going to work post NU6. So if someone wants to be able to spend their funds, they are already on somewhat of a clock to easily do so. And after that, it's going to become much harder. They're going to have to seek support from someone to have a build of Zcashd that both lets you spend funds and builds on NU6, or is a separate from Zcashd wallet or something. So, like, even if at the consensus layer we are technically still supporting these users, like, the rest of the ecosystem is moving on, and will continue to do so everywhere else.
It's also interesting to think about, like, if somebody did show up, so that, maybe they try a new wallet and somehow they learn that, oh, I can't access my Sprout funds, then what do? It seems like they would have to get really vocal, which has a really funny privacy implication. Like, hey, everybody, I really need you to help me.
Hey, I've got 10,000 Zach.
Yeah. So it's a pickle.
Everything is a privacy trade-off in the end.
Yes,
It's all about the trade-offs.
We don't want to know our users, or at least we historically haven't, but that's a flip side, because we need to know our users in order to build the things.
Even the Sprout users. Legacy, yeah.
I really want to know who the Sprout users are, so I can tell them, get your funds out.
Would you pay for that? Like maybe 0.00001% conversion rate between old and new Zec, just to
What's up there with Nate's like diminishing over time one? Yeah, almost sounds like you're suggesting the opposite. Like
yeah, I'm saying only to like market stat, like only today you can convert your old Zec to new Zec, and you get 0.00001%.
I think it'd be worth it. I think there's got to be a price point where we go, right, if we can clear the scrap pool, that is worth, I don't know, $10,000 to us or something, and just to not have to worry about it, to be able to deprecate Sprout entirely. We probably can come up with a
limited time offer.
Yeah. So
$9.99.99.
If everybody, and of course, there are going to be lost keys, so this will never happen. But
and you double that if they also give you the story of why they bought that Zec back at the time or something.
There's a perverse incentive to that, which you want to keep your funds in the old pool so that you get rewarded to move to the new pool. But
it only works once, and then people start to expect it. That's kind of the airdrops dilemma in general. All right, I'll ask a next question. This one can start being responded to by Dodger. So this is about the network upgrade process in light of expanding the number of people who may be collaborating on future Zcash upgrades. And we'll note that we know that ECC is waiting till the emergency mode ends due to the spam attacks and addressing it to do the proper retrospective on the past NU5. So we expect over the next couple of months we'll have kind of a retrospective on the NU5 process that's instructional for network upgrades going further. But the question is, what do you think should be changed in the network upgrade process that might accommodate this more diversified development we're expecting?
Yeah, so I think this is going to become, the next network upgrade is likely to come from an entity that's not ECC. And so this is a nettle we have to grasp and and get done with. I think we've said in the past that I think doing a retro of NU5 is the first logical step, and then talk, have then a conversation, probably centered on Arborist calls or Arborist call spin-offs, where we work together to figure out what does the process for the next network upgrade look like at a high level, and then specifically for whatever it is that's actually going to get deployed. And I think when we were building Zebra, we effectively copied some of the approach that ECC had taken in the past in terms of having audits and whatnot. And during discussions around NU5, we also kind of said, right, we should be making sure that this stuff gets audited, that there's a security proof for the crypto, this sort of stuff. So I think there's already been some work in that space. I think that laying it out more explicitly, giving at least guidelines, maybe we don't want to make them very, very strict rules, but at least guidelines so that other teams know what to expect. Because I think where this question is coming from is like, right, Shielded Labs has raised some money and they want to create the Zcash Sustainability Fund. Well, how do they, okay, they've got the developers. How do they go about actually, getting that change deployed onto the Zcash network? I think it is incumbent upon us to provide a kind of a guideline or a roadmap, right? Start joining the Arborist calls, draft a zip, start getting feedback, start, all this sort of stuff. And then, discussing about what expectations we should be setting for teams around, are they expected to provide implementations for both nodes, or are we, if we end up deciding that we're going to sunset Zcashd, then should people be looking at specifically only building on Zebra? So I think there's a lot of, I think that for those of us who've been involved in Zcash for a long time, it's really obvious. It's simple. We know how it's gonna look like when another team comes in to add something to the Zcash protocol. It's just not obvious to them yet, and we just need to make sure that we lay it out and make it pretty clear, even if it's not set in stone.
It sounds like you're describing things that the burden of that is on the proposer or whatever lead of a particular network upgrade. Is that kind of how you're envisioning it? Or just something that altogether should be done before the network upgrade is completed?
Well, I think there's probably two aspects to that. First of all, in theory, anybody can join an Arborist call and say, right, I propose that we make this change to the protocol. We can't have that automatically become a to-do item for people, because there has to be some sort of gate there about practicality and credibility and competence. On the other hand, I think that as maintainers of core Zcash consensus components, we have a responsibility to help teams who are coming in to work on Zcash, and not be saying, no, you're on your own, we're not going to help you. Well, you build it all, and then we'll evaluate your PR when it's been audited. Like that's not practical either. So I think another thing that we probably need to start taking into account is what the Zcash community wants to see deployed. And we did a little bit of that a few years ago, where we polled Zcap to say, what are your priorities, and that helps provide some guidance. But maybe going forward, what we need to be doing is when a proposal is brought forward, we go out to the community and say, right, are you in favor of this? And if they are in favor of it, then that kind of we may want to say, well, the expectation then is that the core teams who are receiving dev funding, if there is a future dev fund, are expected then to facilitate and help within reasonable bounds of effort and resources to help this project move forward.
Yeah, I'd really like to see the network upgrade process become more holistic. Like to me currently, it's like a really technical process. Like here's the things we're going to ship, and here's when we're going to ship it, when it'll be on testnet, when you need to get your apps ready by. But I think there's like a real opportunity for us to like, especially since we are like sort of have to be careful with our money, with the coin price where it is and how much of the dev fund is left. There's an opportunity to like sort of use the network upgrade process as an opportunity, as like a moment for us to think like, which like marketing strategy bet should we try this time around, and use it to coordinate not only the technical network upgrades, like the literal changes in consensus rules, but also use it as like a shelling point for like the whole community to rally around. Like if you're a wallet developer, sort of the community has agreed that we're going to target like this use case this year, and maybe think about how you could develop your wallet towards that direction, kind of thing. That'd be cool to see.
Riffing on that more, I feel like it ties back into the discussion about the roadmap, because in my mind it would be cool not just to be engaging the whole community about like what should we be doing this year, but like, you know, I think it'd be really helpful for the technology people to like try to, you know, draw out or explain longer term maps. And I feel like part of the challenge is there can be different threads, but they're interacting. Sometimes there's alternatives, like you can't do both, and in my opinion, we should be able, I mean, it's kind of tricky, but if there's some way we can represent the alternatives, and each alternative is gonna be like a DAG of like different pieces that go into the future with like a longer time scale, so that as we're approaching any given upgrade, hopefully we would already have a lot more clarity. Like, you know, it seems like the community wants to go with this alternative. It has these pieces. These teams are working on these pieces. Okay, if the close pieces are getting ready, we can start to get those ready for an upgrade. Because in my experience from ECC, I feel like I mean, this is early retrospective, but one thing is I feel like each upgrade, I personally have had more tunnel vision. So it's sort of like, oh, there's the next upgrade, what should we do? And there's been a lack of a longer term roadmap that the community has weighed in on, right? So we have like implicitly some roadmaps, but it would be good to represent them more clearly to the community across orgs.
Yeah. Is there a way you think that you can make preliminary plans? This is often on my mind that having an absence of a plan isn't desirable, but then putting long-term things on it maybe makes people think potentially that you're committed to that, which isn't usually the point. Is there a way to balance that, you think?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to distinguish, because a lot of people want us, and a lot of projects, crypto projects, do this because I think it's good marketing. Is they have like, here's the next 5 years, here's all these boxes. It's like the schedule. But what I'm talking about is not that, because it's more of a map of like, here's possibilities. And it also, what I'm imagining isn't necessarily time-based. It's just like, if we have ZSAs, then we could have liquid staking if we already have staking. So, it's a graph. Maybe it has like 3 things. And this is like...
It's dependencies.
Yeah, dependencies. And it's more of just a map. So it's not like...
But it's like a liquid Gantt chart.
It's separate. It's separate from this is what we as a community are committed to. The first step is like, here's what's possible that people are interested in. And the second step is, okay, let's commit.
The timing to that, I guess, is right after you deliver the next network upgrade, because the reason I think for the tunnel vision during network upgrades is that you're really focused on closing your bugs and making sure that you're not forgetting anything. And then right behind that, you can be a little bit like in the odd versions of Linux. You can be like, I don't know if it's still the case now.
Yeah.
But like, okay, like what's up with like development? We have a time for new stuff. What's the direction? And then once you took the time to develop it, you then take the time to upgrade.
Any last words on that? We probably have not enough time to
we have
start a new topic. So.
I mean, if I'm to be very quick, it's that the process of getting stuff in, I think, has not been as conducive to people who are not already very in the stack. And to tie back to the earlier threads of the town hall, making that piece easier, I think will make it easier overall to be a bit more agile in terms of what it is that, where we want to head and where we want to explore.
All right, I think we should wrap up. Thank you all so much. This got everything I wanted out of a technical future-looking roadmap session, so that was great. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you to all the panel participants.